Founded in 2014, the Extraordinary Achievers' vision is to empower others to be the best version of themselves. The show is hosted by Chief Lady Waynette Peters, a multi-entrepreneur, empowerment speaker, confidence mentor, positive lifestyle coach, humanitarian ambassador, and a TV host. Lady Waynette is a holder of over 35 humanitarian, philanthropic, and international empowerment contributions and holds 2 chieftaincy titles. Welcome to the Extraordinary Achievers Show.
Thank you for joining us to another episode of the Extraordinary Achievers Show, where we are covering community affairs and interests. Please do join us every Wednesday at 8 p.m. live on Facebook, YouTube, or our website, and there's several other media platforms. We welcome your support. We take this opportunity to thank the various admins of the several Facebook pages that we air live on every Wednesday at 8 p.m. and especially to you that has shared this program. And if you haven't shared it as yet, please go ahead and share with others. We also take this opportunity to thank our media team and all our administration team members at the Extraordinary Achievers. For every share that has been made on social media and all virtual communication tools, I am grateful. To all our viewers from our various platforms, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, LinkedIn, including our website, thank you for your support. We at the Extraordinary Achievers Show super appreciate your time. We would like to encourage you to please follow us and like our social media pages and platforms.
For real-life stories broadcasted live on air, to please subscribe to our newsletter from our website. We will be honored if you could please like and follow our Facebook pages. Stay in touch and tune in by subscribing to our YouTube channel. Thank you for following us on our Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, Tumblr, and TikTok. We are live every Wednesday at 8 p.m. GMT. Please do share with others.
According to recent data from the National Crime Agency, Black people accounted for 14% of missing people in England and Wales between 2019 and 2020, over 4 times 3% of our relative population. We asked the question, what do we know so far about missing Black people? What can we as a community do, and what do we propose to be done next? Every missing person matters. Every missing child matters. And we care. Today, however, we're specifically concentrating on Black, African, Caribbean, Black, British missing people, especially the children. With Black men missing more frequently, 14%, more than Black women, 10%. This is over 4 times the relative population, even though Black, African, Caribbean, Black British groups are 3% of the total population. In London during 2019 and 2020, Black people accounted for 36% of missing people. An investigation needs to be done, and we need to learn why and what can we do. We demand answers from the government. But most importantly, we want to know as a community, what can we do? I am joined today by 3 amazing guests, gentlemen that are on the ground, that are there to support us, that are there working with us. And I would like to introduce you to Paul Mackenzie, who joins us here today. Paul, welcome onto the Extraordinary Achievers Show. I would also like to introduce you to Dean. Dean, welcome onto the Extraordinary Achievers Show.
Good evening.
Good evening. And I would also like to introduce you to Stephen Brown. Stephen, welcome onto the Extraordinary Achievers Show. Gentlemen, can you all hear me?
Loud and clear.
Thank you. Stefan,
Yes.
can you hear me?
Yeah,
Thank you. And Paul, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Thank you very much. Gentlemen, I thank you for your time. Welcome to all our viewers at home, and we're going to take a moment just to say hello to our viewers as you're sharing this program. And the next guest we will have on our screen will be Stefan Brown. Stefan, we appreciate your time. We would like to take some comments from our viewers to welcome you onto the show. We say good evening to you, Kelsey, good evening. And we would like to say good evening to our next guest that has put a comment up. Melissa, good evening to you. And thank you for joining us on this show. Angela, good evening to you. And she says good evening to everyone. And we say good evening, Bangi, and good evening to you too. And thank you for joining us. Louisa, good evening, and thank you for joining us this evening. If you are anywhere where you are from, we would like to say welcome. And Vicky, we acknowledge you and thank you for joining us. Whether you have put a comment on or not, we know you will join in later with some more comments, and we would like to welcome you. Empress Joanne, good evening to you, and thank you for joining us. Andrew, thank you for joining us this evening. Mutoko, Doc, thank you, Dr. Mutoko Samson, for joining us this evening. And Joanne says, they all matter. Every missing child matters. Indeed, every single child matters. And thank you for that comment. Darren Robinson, thank you very much. And thank you for joining us behind the screens today. Joanne says, good evening to everyone and good evening to you. We will be back again with the comments. In the moment, we would like to welcome Stefan Brown back onto our screens. Stefan, thank you for taking time out on today, and our prayers are with you and with your cousin. Stefan Brown is the CEO of Stop Our Kids Being Killed on Our Streets. SOKBKOOS is a non-profit organization based in London and Birmingham with affiliations across the country. The main aim of Stop Our Kids Being Killed on Our Streets is to put an end to the senseless violence and killings committed by our young people within our communities, thus making the streets safer for them and the wider community. Their aim is to join up volunteers, professionals, organizations from the statutory and voluntary sectors to form a coalition to provide advice, guidance, engagement activities, and to support young people and families in our communities affected by violent crimes. They run workshops and programs nationally, supporting schools, parents, and children, creating awareness around gangs, knife crime, counterline criminal exploitation, and mental health, the trauma experienced involved in gang lifestyles. In recognition of his efforts to prevent knife crime on our streets, he is a well-presented individual member in our community. We would like to say thank you for joining us today, and thank you for taking part on this show. Stefan, we are going to ask you the very first question, and we are going to say to you, how have we come to this? What is your thoughts? What are your thoughts at the rate of how Black people, and especially children, are reported as missing?
Well, first of all, can I say, first of all, it hasn't just come to this. This has been happening a very, very long time. Me and Paul Mackenzie are very close friends, the same as Dean. And me and Paul Mackenzie, about, I'd say 6-7 years ago, we did a show down in Margate, and we was talking about county lines and postal codes and children being taken off the streets. We knew this was happening a long time ago, and we told the police and the government, this is what's going to happen to come to light. So be aware and make sure that you understand exactly the concept and the tragedy of this is going to happen. That this was about 5 or 6, 7 years ago. We was telling them this. So it's not something that's just come about. The only reason why we see it's come about now It's because we're actually seeing and more people are experiencing the trauma and the missing of our children. So yeah, it's terrible and it's heartbreaking, but it's not something that's just come about. We told them about this a long time ago to pick themselves up and see the reality of what's been happening, and they haven't done that for us. So it's time for us to sort out as a community, as it takes a village to build a community, for us to do that now. Because no, we're not going to rely on anybody else to do it. We'll do it on our own back and start making the strides and spaces for our children to be safe, secure within our communities. We can't stop the gang warfares. We can't stop the drugs. But what we can do is try and stop our kids getting kidnapped and stolen for county lines, for sex trafficking, for organ parts, for the rest of the things that they're taking children for.
Stefan, we thank you. Stefan, as a community, what do you suggest that we can do?
Sorry?
What do you suggest as a community that we should do?
Well, there's a few things that we all can do. As a community, you can start being part of the organizations that are out there, the good organizations like the three men that are here right on the panel today. Plus, we can start opening up the churches where they have big halls, which are now not open during the week. We can open them up for the halls so it's a safe, secure place for the kids to go to after schools. We can start buying our own minibuses for them to get home. We can start patrolling our own streets, our own parks. Look at the violence that's been happening in the parks just yesterday. And some violence happened today. I'm getting through from the police. So it's worse than a cancer. It's spreading and spreading, and it's only us as the grown-ups, because we're the elders now. We can put the gauntlet down and say, well, you know what? How much more do we have to take before we turn around and say is enough is enough? Enough is enough has been for a very long time. Very long time. It's time now for the community to step out and say, right, this is what we do. We don't want this on our estate. We don't want this on our streets. We don't want this in our parks. And us on the ground are doing the work to make that sure that some places are safe. But we can't be everywhere at once. So just make us understand. You'll understand what the hard work is, what it is on the street. A lot of us don't go on TV or media and all them things anymore because we're not egos. We're there to do the work. And if people are doing the same work as us, it's not about egos. It's about saving kids' lives. So this is what we're on about, and this is what we're trying to do. And so at the end of the day, I think the bottom line is got to come around as a community. We've got church people, we've got doctors, we've got lawyers, we've got mental health, everybody in our community who work for these organizations, that we can all come together, be in one place where you can get everything you need in that place and security, and know that you're going to get home safe. And if parents have any problems with their children, call us. We're going to help. We're going to sort it out, and we have to put them under a ring, and we mentor the boys and girls. Remember, there is girls as well who's going through this same kind of thing. So we've got to stop the snatching off the streets. We've got to be visual as we used to do in our days when we was at school, when I said, don't talk to strangers. It should be compulsory that we have speakers like ourselves in every school, to tell them what the dangers of going out on the street on your own, what the dangers of getting picked up for county lines, what the trial and tribulations you could be doing, that with the raping, the pillaging, the things that you don't want to do in your life. And then once you finish that, they throw you away, or the teacher go and stab somebody, or and so on and so on and so on. We can give them the actual understanding what's happening on the street today. So every school should have this so that they know. The schools don't want to do it because they seem to think that their schools are higher than anybody else, and they don't want us to say, oh, that's a bad school. It's not that it's a bad school. It's happening outside their schools. So we've got to make the schools get involved as well.
Okay. Stefan, we thank you for your input and thank you for your time, and thank you for having to have taken time out today. We know how much this means to you today. We are now going to welcome Dean Okai on our screens as we thank Stefan Brown from Stop Our Kids Being Killed from the Streets, who just joined us from where he's at today. Dean, once again, good evening. Thank you and welcome onto the show.
Good evening, you're welcome.
Thank you. Dean Okai, Senior ADPAC CIC founder. Dean Okai, Senior is the founder of the African Diaspora Public Affairs Community, CIC, which came about after 27 years of business and advocacy through various organizations, starting when he joined Panther UK on May the 7th, 1993. That political education led him speaking at the Brixton Rec for the Panther meetings and speaking engagements at SOAS University, Hammersmith and West College. This was the perfect training ground for public speaking and understanding politics from a grassroots level. He was worked across media production, music publishing, web and graphic design, and retail businesses. In 2017, Dean set up a think tank called the Solution Room to bring African Caribbean solution providers together to establish community policy for us to lay down as blueprints that led to establishing our own ecosystem. All of this activity involved into the collective institution ADPAC CIC, which has created to present the African Caribbean population at a national level. Today, ADPAC works with a number of organizations, advocates, and professionals to add value to identity and establish institutions that serve every African Caribbean need specifically. And today, the founder, Dean Okai, joins us on the Extraordinary Achievers Show. Dean, we would like to say thank you so very much to the work that you're doing. You are causing so much excitement because of the change that you're bringing to others. And today we welcome your views on the Extraordinary Achievers. So Dean, we have been seeing WhatsApp messages go up and down, social media messages that are going up and down, photographs of young Black children missing. And what is your view on the missing children and the rate that it is escalating at?
Well, I think my view is the same as Paul Mackenzie and Stefan. I was aware 6-7 years ago, but nobody was listening because our children don't have the value in their eyes that their children have. And if you think about county lines, let's ask ourselves a question. When it comes to the culture of grooming, is this African Caribbean culture? Is this African culture or Caribbean culture? The truth is it's neither. It's Eastern European culture where they used it to groom young ladies to traffic them within the sex industry. They taught this to our criminal underclass, who were a generation abandoned, who, let's say, are now between 30 and 40. They're even younger now, but at the time between 30 and 40, who would seduce our children with promises, and then very quickly that would escalate into intimidation, violence, and sexual abuse, and even sexual blackmail that was videoed on phones that both my colleagues have seen. So that was a litmus test for Eastern Europeans to see what the response would be. So when you see a very low community response in terms of reprisal, and you see a very low coordinated police and officials approach, such as the mayor's office, who would control the coordination of police and the press to specifically warn African Caribbean people to let us know that our children are being targeted. It let them know that our children were a low-hanging fruit in order to kidnap. Now, these criminal gangs will kidnap anybody's children. But if you know they're going to be lesser reprisals, you're just going to go for the easiest to target. So it's no surprise for those in the know. Herein lies our problem. We have the intellectual capital. We have the social capital to galvanize our people. What we lack is the financial capital to execute it and bring it together. So as I can sit here like a nodding dog agreeing with everything that Stefan says when he talks about the coordinated approach. This is called the public health approach. We have the initiative. We have done a mapping exercise of delivery partners that go all the way across youth engagement delivery, be it psychologists, child-parent intervention, student advocacy, mentoring, rites of passage, supplementary schools, down to our own school curriculum. What we lack is the capital to execute. So if we have those who are in the position who have sympathy, and I'm now talking to allies who we call friends of ADPAC, I'm now talking to CSR programs, corporate social responsibility, because as we seek to protect our children with an intra-agency approach to protect them from 3 to 21 young adults, it requires a number of resources and it requires a huge collaboration. What ties it together is the capital, because we have delivery partners and we would seek through this broadcast to acquire more for the schools to industry pipeline. But what we require is the capital and the will to execute our policy through a national level infrastructure.
So then if we have got the capital and we source the capital, do we think ourselves as a community, without the government's help, that we can continue to do better than what the government is doing at the moment?
Well, let's take the government out of the equation, because the government doesn't actually do anything whatsoever for African Caribbean people. There's a policy that was created in the States under Nixon called benign neglect. Now, the policy of benign neglect was created because the civil rights movement became so big. What they decided they would do is observe our problems and made a decision. The problems will solve themselves. Now, no problem is solved without two things: policy, which is specific, and resources to apply to those policies. Now, the minute that you see the government order a report, which they had their sticky hands all over from the outset to make a decision about what that report would, how that report would come to fruition, that was them announcing that we are now in the era of benign neglect as far as African Caribbean people are concerned. Because there's no need to say there is no racism, because we're all aware via our daily experiences that there is institutional inequality, in lay people's terms, institutional racism. So the fact that nobody would actually put their hand to that report and people ran away from it as quickly as they formed it is evidence of that. So take for granted that African Caribbean people are in the highest echelons of every single industry. I'm in a position to know because I have 8,500 African professional contacts on LinkedIn. Now, when you talk to lay people, they have all the will in the world, but can't help. So from my position as a strategic advisory committee of ADPAC, it's about separating beneficiaries and contributors. Contributors are delivery partners, and beneficiaries are there to back up our policy with their will. So if you're asking about delivery partners and the professionals, we have them from A to Z in the African Caribbean population, because we do it in the world, whether we are social workers, whether we are teachers, whether we are mentors, we do all of this in the so-called mainstream. Now we merely call on us to deliver it specifically for and on our behalf.
Thank you, Dean. Dean, do you think it's just more awareness because of social media that we have now that is highlighting how many Black people, and especially Black children, that are missing? Or do you truly believe that there is a massive increase in the children that are missing today?
There's no increase in children missing, and there's no increase in the serious youth violence. It's remained quite stable. It's awareness that we have now. So thanks to people like Don who founded blackpeoplemissing.com, I ask people to contribute to this resource as well. An organization such as ABPAC finds these people and the entities to be delivery partners, because what it does is it makes us more robust in our ability to collect data, to communicate with the public, and to respond to the problem of our missing people with our own tools. Where there is a will, there is a way. And what you are seeing now is that we are responding with our own tools unfunded. But what is actually being architected is an ecosystem that specifically serves African Caribbean people. Other than the colloquialism of Black, I don't so much ascribe to Black because it means absolutely nothing. So for the race industry is fantastic, but anybody can self-elect to be Black when there is a budget. But when we're talking about criminality, everybody is uniquely aware who is Black and who isn't. So when we speak with specificity, we speak about African Caribbeans, and we'll be speaking about African Caribbeans when it comes time to the resources to solve our problems. When we say Black children are missing, African Caribbean children are going missing. African Caribbean service providers will actually be the ones who circumvent the environment in which it's easy for them to go missing, and it's easy for our children to be susceptible to serious youth violence. So via an initiative like the Schools to Industry Pipeline, we aggregate all of our youth engagement delivery partners and apply to huge sources of money. And then it is about fairly distributing that across delivery partners to change the landscape that we experience now. But this is 21st century Garveyism, and we'll be the ones that solve our problems.
Fantastic. Thank you for that input. We have a couple of comments from our audience that we would like you to comment on. The first comment is from J2E, and J2E says, I so understand this topic, but what I'm struggling with is how are our children supposed to gain their independence if we have to be monitoring their every move? And what would you like to say about that?
This is a dilemma that me and Paul were discussing as fathers. It's heartbreaking equally as it's angering that a 14-year-old young man was stabbed yesterday by a gang of young men. My son is 14, Paul's son is 14. Paul says his son goes out locally. I'm not letting my son, me and his mum made a decision that he doesn't need to go anywhere at the moment. It's heartbreaking. When I was his age, I was all over London, discovering what a young man was in being able to drink alcohol at 14 in a very different time in 1988. And having the freedom. We have to use our diligence in what we're allowing our young people to do now, being aware of the environment, because we can talk about them being free, but we need them alive. You see, we can change anything as the environment changes, but if our children aren't here, there's no opportunity. So just be aware of that when we're asking that question.
Thank you. We are now going to welcome Paul Mackenzie onto our screens. Before we welcome Paul Mackenzie onto our screens, we are going to acknowledge some of the comments from home. And our first comment coming up on the screen is from Joanne, and she says, good evening to all and good evening to you and thank you. Mutoko says, this is such an important topic. Thank you for bringing it to the table and thank you for supporting us. And Hali says, good evening, everyone, and good evening to you, and we thank you. And Tani says, good evening and good evening to you, and it's nice to see you too. Patricia Bailey, hey, Han, and thank you. We had a good conversation earlier, and thank you so much for your support. Patricia Bailey, you are a gem. And Pastor Josephine says, good evening to all our guests and to all of us, and good evening to you. And Joanne says, we definitely have to build our community, the Black community. Thank you. And Joanne also says, we have to stand up for ourselves and sort this out. Only us can do this. Enough is enough. We must save the future generations. Our children are dying on the streets. Vicky says, yes, unity is important to build a community, and education is so important to young children to understand the danger in this community and in their community. Joanne says, so say they don't value the lives of Black children. And T. Alabi says, good evening to everyone. Good evening, Dole. Bangi says, making our children safe is the highest priority. All lives matter. It is everyone's business to protect our children. Tracy Love says, good evening, Dean, and good evening to everyone, and good evening to you, Tracy. Joanne says, wow, our children are low-hanging fruits, ready to be kidnapped or killed on the streets. This is shocking. We thank you for all your comments, and we will come back to the comments as we read the last comment for now from T. Alabi that says, the government are not here for us. We really need to wake up to that. Once again, we're bringing it back into the community, and we're saying, as a community, what can we do? We have organizations such as ADPAC, such as Youth Unity, such as the organization run by Stefan that is there, and it is for us to join these organizations to support what they're doing and to highlight the work that they are doing in the community, which is helping our children. And this is the best way forward for us. We would like to welcome Paul Mackenzie from Youth Unity onto our screens.
Hi, guys.
Once again, good evening. Hi. Paul Mackenzie, Youth Unity, CIC, is a non-profit organization which was established to provide effective help and support to vulnerable young people and adults that are affected by group violence, gangs, drugs, and other forms of exploitation, such as human trafficking, CSD, and extremism. Your work, which successfully, in close collaboration with statutory organization, was commissioned and has commissioned services and charities offering workshops, projects, and training for young people and professionals. Your focus is early intervention and early identification of those at risk from gangs, serious youth violence, criminal exploitation, and associated vulnerability strands. Paul Mackenzie and his team offer non-judgmental advice via motivational workshops, which they deliver to local schools, youth organizations, and to parents. And they have a distinctive need to understand the complexity of processes such as county lines and child trafficking. And I agree with you. And we all agree with you. As Paul Mackenzie says, prevention, preparation, and protection. I think when I was having an early conversation with Paul, we talked about being proactive rather than being reactive. And that is what his organization is providing. Paul, you have another outlook that is very interesting to me and which I love. And I share that passion that you have, which we would like you to give an insight to our audience. Can you please give an overview of your understanding of how the market is now saturated, give an outline of the county lines as it is as a business model?
Okay, then this is very, very interesting to be here talking today about this model. Of which I'm going to take you back to when Stefan came on there and when Dean spoke about how many years we've been trying to raise awareness about this particular model, which we're now seeing played out, which involves our children, which has always involved our children. But the awareness of what is happening now is, I call it the beautiful devil, because now we have social media, now we have gaming platforms, now we have many different means of which young people are being approached and groomed. When we spoke earlier, the key word I mentioned was the word that we keep missing out, and that word is distribution. And the challenge and the problem that we are having now, which we put inside this box and call county lines and grooming and abduction and sexual exploitation, all of those things, is distribution. And we need to start changing the narrative around what is actually happening. For example, we spoke, and over the last couple of weeks, I've been speaking so much about why our children go missing and where our children go missing to. And it goes back to when I drove up to Margate with Stefan, because we identified that there was a problem happening, which wasn't a problem that was specific to London. It was actually a problem that was going outside of London, and young people were going missing. And this is 5 or 6 years ago. Young people were going missing, some of them by choice. I have to add that. It's so important to add that, and I'll get back to that. Some of them abducted, and some of them just basically used in criminal exploitation and child sex exploitation. So we went on this journey of discovery to see where these children end up. And it was one of the most shocking things that I ever experienced in terms of how a young person's life could start off with them being in school, looking for friendships, trying to build relationships, to them ending up in these cuckoo houses as new skins being used to sell drugs and hide weapons. And this is the stark reality. So me and Stefan went there, we saw this, we came back, and we raised so many awareness videos about this. And it fell on deaf ears. And I'm going to say this, I'm saying this on this broadcast, it fell on deaf ears because it wasn't knocking people's doors. So when we made these videos, when we were going around schools and schools were saying, well, actually, we don't think it's a problem. And we were persistent saying, well, actually, if we don't address this now, it's going to be massive. And it's as massive as it is now. The County Lines network is increasing year upon year. And it's specifically down to distribution. Now, I think you're referring to the conversation we had this morning where I went completely out of the box and I asked you a really specific question about how, if we were to compare what happened in 9/11 to what happened now on our streets with our young people, is there any correlation? And you said no. And I have been spending my time racking my brains outside the box thinking, why is there so much? Why is County Lines on the increase? And the only thing that we're missing and we're not talking about is the oversaturated drugs market. Now, the reason I said 9/11, and I threw that lemon in there and I said, look, what happened in 9/11 was, yes, there was a war and there was conflict that happens. But we tend to forget that where that invasion took place is where 90% of the poppy is grown on this planet. And up until the point of that, when it was overtaken, let's call it overtaken, there was a market for the poppy seed, and the US was the biggest importer and purchaser of that poppy seed. After 9/11, it was basically them taking that. And so my point is this, is that since 9/11, County Lines has been happening for the last 20, 25, nearly 30 years. In fact, it's been, criminal exploitation always happens. People will always find somebody who's vulnerable and then get them to do their dirty works. That's exactly how it works. But now we have a business model around it, which is basically centered all around the distribution of specific drugs. And so if we need to find out why there's a need for our children, or as Dean said, why there is a need for children that are unaccountable, children that the community don't care for, we have to start looking at what this distribution is and why there is an oversaturated market. And then once we see the oversaturation and we can see the obvious elephant in the room, we can start asking questions like, okay, when our children go missing, where do they go? And I've been watching so many posts over the last week and a half, 2 weeks, and nobody's asking that question. Where do those children end up? And I've been saying for so many years, as Stefan's been saying, as Dean has been saying, that if you want to find out what's really going on with young people and these county lines, you need to do exactly what me and Stefan did at that time, was to actually go and see where the children are going to. Now I'm going to reverse back because I know I do go on a lot, but I want to talk about the young people that go missing versus the young people that go missing intentionally. So we have a cohort of young people that are going missing. They're being abducted through their vulnerabilities. Social media, the beautiful devil, is the perfect grooming ground for so many young people. So many young people have been groomed through social media that, for me, and I always talk about this in my videos, we need to monitor what is happening on our social media platforms. And I know some people are going to come in the comments and say, well, how do we monitor what our children are doing? And it's quite simple. And I said it in a video the other day. If you have Sky Television in your house and you're the one that pays for that, if you have purchased a phone for your child, you should have the right to see the content and the engagement on that phone. And if you don't have the right to see that, then something is going on in your house. And I've been saying this for so many years. What we do is we allow our children, we give them that caveat so they can hang themselves. They can hang themselves using social media. And groomers know this. Look how many platforms have been taken down in the last 6 months, which have been asking young people to send images of their bodies in, and actually paying young people to send images in of their body. And that's grooming in my thing. But if we stick to county lines and the context of county lines of criminal exploitation and child sex exploitation, we have to look at how and why the market is emerging. And the market is emerging simply through distribution. And as much as we want to stop our children from going out to the park, stop our children from going on social media, stop our children from experiencing what it's like to be a youth, a child, a young person, we have to understand that unless we take control of this as a community, and when I say control of this, I don't mean waiting for a video so we can react to it, so we can say, okay, let's go out onto the streets now, knowing that we've known this for 20 years. And in fact, if we are to be accountable and totally truthful for what's going on within our community, some of us actually know people that run these rings. But because we don't like to be accountable unless somebody knocks our door, we are the ones that do not talk about that. Mm-hmm. And so what we talk about is the reaction of it. So we have a video where a child was there was an attempted abduction of a child. So now we start asking questions. Where are our children going? Who's trying to abduct our children? Is it because they're black children? Is it because they're vulnerable children? Is it? There's so many different is it when it comes to criminal exploitation. What we need to do is actually address and look at where and why those children are needed. So the conversation that we had this morning also spoke about the communication, the languaging that young people are experiencing at the moment. And this is key, because for the last few years, I've also been talking about music. I've also been talking about the platforms that allow my son, my 14-year-old son, to be in the car on the way to school, to be listening to lyrics that talk about trapping, sexual abuse, robbery, stabbing, stealing, selling drugs, wearing Rolexes, the list goes on. Why are our children allowed to listen to this material? Why are we not petitioning those platforms that have made popular culture so corrupted for our children? Now, the reason I'm talking about music and media is because we have to understand that what goes into our head becomes us. So our behaviors are formed by what goes into our heads. And these platforms know this. This is why you would have an artist who talks about going up country, selling drugs, living their best life, killing people, reaching ridiculous numbers like 19, 20 million views a week. Who do you think's watching that? Certainly not adults. So young people are watching these videos, and these influencers are selling them this dream that they don't even live themselves. And this is one of my biggest beer bugs, is why we have become a culture that rents the Lamborghinis, we rent the Urus Jeeps, we rent the watches. We even go as far as renting, and I heard this the other day and I did my research on it. Selfridges and other designer shops are now actually renting clothing to young people. It's ridiculous. So we are now in a system where a young person believes that they need to earn more money than they should at the age of 14, 13, 16, and certainly by the age of 18. They should be driving, they should be wearing watches, they should be dressing in the best clothes. And these are all things that feed back into the narrative from a groomer. So a groomer now has a canvas in which to paint his picture. So he can now approach a young child and say, well, do you want to belong? You know, I've been in over 120 schools and I've asked this question: what is it that you like about your friends in schools? And almost every child says the fact that they are in a positive relationship. So the fact that we are in a relationship. Now, groomers openly seek people that are not in active relationships. They're very vulnerable, they're easily influenced. And those children or those young people are groomed into things like county lines. Now, I'm not saying that everybody who goes into county lines, and this is for the record, not everybody that goes into county lines is a victim. And we have to address this as well. Many young people that go into county lines do it intentionally. And they do it because they're buying into the lifestyle which is being portrayed on all of these platforms. So for me, if we are to change anything about what's going on with our children, we have to start aiming higher than our community. We have to start aiming at the influencers. Start looking at, why does an influencer speak about sending young black children to universities? I'm going to say it. Sending young black children to universities on one hand, and then on the other hand, still talk about stabbing his ops and killing other people on this arm. Why are we allowed to listen to that? And why are these influencers now in the position where they're getting 20, maybe I've even seen a video with 50 million views? Why are these platforms and these influencers allowed to speak this language directly into the minds of our children? And these are the questions you need to ask when you're talking about county lines and how do we stop county lines growing. Unfortunately, as long as you have the narrative that you are a teenager and you should be able to buy your own clothes, you should be able to support your family, you should be able to drive a car, you should have a Rolex, you should have a relationship, you should be able to do all that host of different things that they're sold on social media and places like YouTube. Until we address that narrative, you're going to see an increase year on year on county lines.
Paul, thank you so much for that. We're going to address some comments that we have from our audience and viewers, and as they come up, and Paul will be back with you shortly. Thank you. Andrew Roach says, what are the necessary observations we need to adopt in seeking to prevent such occurrences? And that is a question that we will pose back to you when you're back on our screens, Paul. And Vicky says the government agencies knows about these issues. And I think that's Vicky. Yes, social media plays a big part by taking action. I think we are realizing that the government is aware that this is happening. But what we are saying is that as a community, how can we come together to make a difference? And Star says, thank you for clarifying. Absolutely, it is heightened sensitivity, a trend that has remained stationary. And Jamel Nathan says, it is about parents being responsible and accountable. And that is very, very important. It's about parents being accountable for their children. And Tracy Love says, this petition is for public inquiry into the causes surrounding missing Black people. Please sign and share the link that she has posted in the comment box. Tia Labi says, it's about teaching children how to survive in various situations, talking about it, etc. So talk to your children more. Vicky says, this is so sad to hear about this case. I pray for the young boy and the family. Mbangi says, there's a lack of awareness about the disparities in missing rates of Black children. There should be adverts on television, regular missing appeals every month, billboards and information in schools. Oftentimes, children go missing straight from the school gates. And Dr. Vita, thank you for joining us. Dr. Vita says, as a mother, this is very concerning. Esquire Charles Lawson says, I really do agree with the last speaker, Dino Kai. The issue of this gang needs to be seriously addressed. At that moment of Esquire Charles Lawson, we are going to take a moment to play this advert of the EFSE restaurant, EFSE restaurant next to New Cross Gate. We are going to take a moment just to look at this video.
Anybody, when no one throws anybody, when no the body, I can't something, go back to fele, I can't something. You want job where you never work, should not because myself I never talk. I look you, they laugh, you go, I shall know.
We would like to thank you for joining us on the Extraordinary Achievers Show. We would like to thank you for your comments. We thank you for sharing. We thank you for your time. And we would like to thank you for joining us in addressing the issue of the missing Black people. And especially today, we're looking at the missing children. And we have the experts that are on the ground and working with us, coordinating. We have Dino Kai. We also have Paul Mackenzie. Their contact details we will put on our screens, and also their social media contacts will be in our comment boxes below. We will read a few more comments from you, and we have a comment from Sugar Ray, and Sugar Ray says it's shocking, and indeed it is absolutely shocking. Honorable Bola Olivia says very pathetic, missing kids on the increase. Vicky says, yes, of course, it is a drug wars. And Darren says, lots of crucial information in today's show. We thank you. There was a comment from Aramarum earlier. We'll put it back onto our screens as I read. Ruby Brown says, Paul is right. Sometimes you have to cut the head off the snakes. And that is a saying that Paul also says, cut the head off the snakes. Aramarum says, we are so blessed to have our leaders stepping up. Bless up and thank you to you for your acknowledgement. And as he's acknowledging all our guests, and he says, may God renew us endlessly. Love the leads, the way that this week is going and the way that the show is going. We thank you for your comment. D Rose says, exactly, Paul, where have they been? People are just glad to see them back like that it is. Vicky, safeguarding and putting passwords onto their phones. Is she agreeing with what Paul said, is that look at your children's phones. Ruby Brown says, literally go into the eye of the storm. That's where the problem is. Atani says, so sad that children and young people are missing to county lines and criminals exploit them to sell and transport drugs. Annie says, the way young people dress make them a target. Tia Labi says, we also need to target girls. Please, it's the girls that are also vulnerable and important, of no fathers in their lives. Vicky says, the music should have age limit. Annie says, the music is bad influence. And unfortunately, musicians are the most influencers into the young people's lives. Annie also says, most parents allow their children too much freedom on social media because it's their babysitter. And how so very true. Tialabi says, Annie sees so true, and our children are sometimes more fuller formed. Honorable Bola Olivia says, this analysis on music and media by Paul is spot on. Aram says, yes, popular culture corrupts for decades. I was told my music makes you think, hence I won't get major radio playlistings unless I join the dark side. So go figure that out. Patrick T says, RuPaul's point, I agree with him about the danger of negative messaging, but can't it be argued that top rap and drill artists are sometimes reflecting the reality around them? Patricia Bailey says, I believe the Xbox games or consoles are So violent, our children are making up characters and killing people in the game is just awful. We thank you for your comments and we ask you to keep the comments coming. We will be back onto the comments as we read Annie C's comments, and she says, yes, and the whole urban look, most young people will attack people who look like them. It's a uniform as well as the young girls dressing a certain way. Thank you for all your comments. Keep them coming. If you've got any questions for our guest tonight, please do bring them forward. We are going to go back to Dean Okai as we welcome him back onto our screens. And Dean, once again, thank you for joining us this evening. Dean, so now we've talked about it. We are talking about it. We have shared a lot of pictures around social media of missing children. How do we identify the children that are missing because they want to be missing? And how do we identify the children that have been kidnapped in your line of work? How do you see that difference? The children that are missing because they want to go missing for a while because they want to go and sell drugs. How do you identify those to those that have been kidnapped?
We don't. It's totally irrelevant, to be honest. If children are missing, then they're supposed to be in their homes. This is why I think rather than isolating one particular point, I would love for everybody to take in its totality what Stefan has said, what Paul has said, what I am saying. We are speaking across purpose with cross-cutting themes. We're speaking about slightly different elements. We go to the source now. So it's not about one particular issue because it's very layered. It's not in isolation about how our children dress, because a child will stab your child just to see how the body drops based on the psychology. It's not music alone. It's not video games alone. It's a matrix of elements that actually is creating a mainstream subculture for our children to find serious youth violence acceptable, to abscond under their own jurisdiction acceptable, and for society to become more apathetic because we become used to what is happening. So when we take all of that into totality, this is why in Edinburgh, when it was the knife crime capital of Europe, they employed the public health approach, which was an intra-agency approach where everybody came together to actually service all of the needs of the children and coordinate activity so we could circumvent every single element. Now, I look at people like Stefan and Paul as custodians in our community. This is the term that I use for them. So there are initiatives that we're creating that from the embryonic stages, I would share with men and women of this ilk. There is a music project that we are crafting now to shift youth culture from where it is today into a space of more community inclusion with a number of artists who are highly influential that we make delivery partners in this, that is about integrity. So I wouldn't go into the details because delivery partners need to come together for initiatives of this kind. But what I will say is when I talk about the schools to industry pipeline, that is a wider initiative that addresses every single element that we're talking about because it's very layered. There's no one particular issue. And it goes all the way from the educational components, the cultural components, bringing in early interventions such as African rites of passage that teaches our children how to be better citizens, that has mentoring for when they go off track, that has family intervention for when the families break down. So it goes across the board, culturally competent psychological services in terms of the school bullying of students, where it might start, where they'll end up being isolated and then excluded. So the advocates such as Black Child Agenda or Taking Positive Steps. So when you involve all of these elements, it is about holistically addressing the problem. So I don't want you to take what I'm saying in isolation, what Paul's saying or what Stephanie's saying. It's a combined approach because we're delivery partners. And if we don't look at it like that, we will fail our children time and time again. So we have the intellectual capital, we have the social capital. What we are required to do now is engage with delivery partners to identify the financial capital. And there's one more solution that I do want to talk about. When we demonstrated on Friday outside of City Hall, because they've employed this policy of benign neglect, we called for the creation of a role, and we have to call for the creation of roles. So we called for the creation of the role of African Caribbean Liaison Officer to be formally put into the mayor's office to shadow every single formal London Assembly briefing that the mayor is privy to, so that our community is involved, because we represent 2 million London citizens. And then we grow that out to a national level wherever we are, because we are 3 million nationally. So in London, we are a sizable and important statistic as African Caribbeans, not as BAME, not as Black, but specifically as African Caribbeans. And we want that proportional representation and that role created with their assistant to specifically work for and on behalf of our community.
Thank you, Dean Okai. If you've just joined us, you've joined us halfway through, we were just listening to Dean Okai, Senior, who is the founder of the African Diaspora Public Affairs Community, CIC. And he is on the ground on behalf of the African Caribbean individuals in London, across the country. And at grassroots levels, he's looking at what can we do. We have a question for you, Dean. And the question is from Andrew Roach. And Andrew says, why is there a reluctance by some of the Black community to get involved with organizations who are seeking to change the narrative and produce solutions owned by us?
Again, there's a number of factors. Let's not get it twisted. The vast majority, we are merely representative of any other ethnicity, and the vast majority of people are lay people. I sift people into these two clear groups: beneficiaries and contributors. ADPAC doesn't seek really volunteering so much from lay people. I ask people to do what they do within their expertise, specifically for us in any of the areas. So when it comes to saying the vast majority of no ethnicity get involved, but what everybody can do is donate to any of our grassroots entities, strategic entities. If you want to donate £2, it's not too small. If you want to donate £5, £10, £20, it is the aggregation of those donations that actually make all of our organizations feasible. So when it comes to lay people, there is a role. Goodwill is great. Capital is better, because we all need it. And in order to keep all of our organizations feasible, this is what I recommend for the masses who wouldn't personally get involved. Now, for those, like a meeting I had today with Tracy Love, and I appreciate your invitation to Accenture. Directly, she came down on Friday. She invited me to meet her colleagues so that they can impart their intellectual capital and possibly CSR programs. So that kind of practical help is invited as well by all of us. And I go across the board, whether it is Rites of Passage or any of our civic organizations in our community. But to be a little kinder to us, the vast majority of us are lay people when it comes to youth engagement or any of the specialist areas. However, if you can, get in where you fit in with the same energy that you would go to a march and volunteer within any of these organizations.
Thank you. We have been listening to Dean Okai, Senior, and the founder of ADPAC, who works with a number of organizations, advocates, and professionals to add value to identify and establish institutions that serve every African and Caribbean need specifically. Dean, what would you like to say to our viewers and audience as your closing statement for this evening?
I'd like to say, first of all, we've got to understand that in this lockdown environment, that we are being bombarded with psychological warfare. So the first thing is to find balance in our own minds and spirits so that we're not reacting every 2 minutes. Be cognizant of where your children are, be cognizant of the company they keep, the activities they're involved in. And this goes either way, whether you think your child is a potential victim or a potential predator, because either way, a life will get lost. What I recommend wholly for any of us is that we engage with rites of passage when our children are, let's say, from 8 to teenage years, because organizations like Manhood Academy, WYLA, Origin HQ, and MAG offer tenets of life for young people that just put them on the right path of citizens. Now, all of those organizations have female counterparts, and they also have parental classes, which makes us more aware. I recommend the same with Paul's organization and 100 Black Men of London. So just do the research for who is in your area. Speak with your neighbors in terms of Safer London protocols. Know the families around you. Let's not ignore each other. We're not English. And I think we've separated ourselves to such a degree that we've become English. We don't know who our neighbors are. We don't speak with the parents of those who may be predators. And these things are very easy for us to solve at a parental level before they become a problem at our children's level. In order for us to be a community, which we aren't currently, don't be under any illusion, we just live in neighborhoods, we will have to start to take on these protocols of getting to know each other again.
Thank you. We truly appreciate you for your input and taking time. And as a friend, I'd like to say thank you for your friendship. Thank you for your mentorship. And thank you for assisting me in any time I reach out to you. You have been a friend and you have been a comrade and you have been exceptionally helpful in our community. You're an uncle, a father figure, and a mentor to our children in the community. And would like to say thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We would like to go back to Paul Mackenzie from Youth Unity.
Hi.
Youth Unity, CIC, is a non-profit organization established to provide effective help and support to the vulnerable young and adults affected by group violence, gangs, drugs, and other forms of exploitation, such as human trafficking, CSE, and extremism. We would like to pose this question to you, Paul, from one of our viewers. Sugar Ray says, is it because there's a breakdown of dialogue between parents and a child, which gives the prospective gang member or opportunist the chance to influence people's children?
Okay, it's a great question. Let me make this absolutely transparent and clear. The majority of children that go missing or end up in county lines are not all from problematic households. In fact, most of them are from households where the communication is very good, which is why there's always that surprise that they've gone missing, or always that demand to find out where they are. Now, communication in what we deliver is always key. It's how you deliver that. It's how you as a parent understand your child's communication. I think that's one of the key things, is understanding how your child communicates in the house versus how they communicate outside of the house are two completely different things. You have a child that you wave them off in the morning, they're wearing school uniform, and we've had so many of this. They're wearing school uniform, the neatest children ever, and then they're spotted by lunchtime, not in school, but wearing tracksuits on bikes in local parks. So for me, the communication that you as a parent impart on your child is very key. It's very important. However, we cannot dilute the fact that there are so many children that go missing, so many children that voluntarily go into county lines from reasonably good households. Now, I want to really just rewind a second because I read a couple of those comments, and I feel it would be unfair for me to leave this talk without talking about something called problem, reaction, solution. And I'm going to try and break this down and in terms of where young people are. So young people now are being told, and this is why I mentioned popular culture, and this is obviously part of one of the workshops we do with young people, is that they are being told that there is a problem on the streets. They are being told on a day-to-day, millions of views, artists talking all the time about there being a problem on the street. That's the problem phase. So now their minds have readjusted to the fact that out there is a problem. So the reaction is, and this is what when we see serious youth violence, so the reaction is to prepare for the worst. So we got a lot of children, and it's specifically coming from good households, preparing for the worst. And this is where the problem starts to multiply. So you have problem, reaction, solution. So the solution now is clearly obvious. It's the elephant in the room. So that if you have the fear of something pending, something's going to happen to you, because my influencers talk about it. Everybody's talking about it online. Look, if you go to Wood Green or if you go to Edmonton, you can't go there. Even though they don't know you, you can't go to specific areas because you've heard it on social media, or because you've been told it, or because your influencer sings about somebody in a different area, and because you live in the same area as them, you can't go to that area there. That's the problem, is that the illusion is what's being magnified onto our children, and this is what they're listening to. So the problem is that much of what you see on social media is an illusion. It's about playing up your role. You know, it's about artists going on there who borrow things, who borrow cars, like I said before. They borrow the clothes, they borrow just to make themselves look like they're making money. So now the problem is that illusion now translates into the reaction. So the reaction is that young people want to do that as well. And this is the problem we face when we are talking about going as deep as a snake's head, because for me, and it always will be, what goes into somebody's head creates a behavior. And I will say that until the day I die. What goes into somebody's head, and I'll say it again, creates a behavior. Now, the solution for those young people is having the problem and the reaction. The solution is possibly carry a knife, just in case somebody from the other area, or I meet up with a group of young people that they're carrying a knife, so I need to carry a knife. That's one solution for a young person. We're not saying as adults that's in any way sensible, but if you're living in fear, if you've been sold the illusion that this is going to happen, if you fall asleep on the bus, I've heard so many young people talk about dozing off on the bus and waking up 2 stops further on and actually running for their lives to get back 2 bus stops. This is crazy. And this is an illusion that has been painted and it's been reinforced through social media, the beautiful devil, through YouTube, through music, through videos that we see, you know, when we share those videos of violence happening, like what we saw the other day in Hyde Park. All of those things young people see. And so they start preparing for the worst. So the solution for them is, if they need money, it's county lines. If they need protection, carry a knife. If they need a relationship, go on social media. I heard the most ridiculous thing the other day. I heard a young girl talking about, and it actually references one of the music tracks I was listening to, about how she's prepared to go with a boy if he can buy a specific handbag. And these are the messages that young people. So now my mind starts to think, so if that's the value that's being placed on that sexual exploit, if I was a groomer, how easy would it be for me to entice that person or entice that group of people in and get them into some kind of a situation where I can abduct them? You know, I could take them up country. They could join the whole sex exploitation ring. How easy is that if we are placing values on things like our relationships and likening them to things like handbags? And for me, we have to understand that the value and belief systems of our young people have been corrupted, and those value and belief systems are being worked on as we speak. And I can guarantee you this: if you go on YouTube before the end of this week, there'll be a new influencer. There'll be somebody else talking about a beef. There'll be somebody else talking about the people that they've stabbed. They even name them, or they talk about specific areas. So your child is getting this reinforced, or your young person's getting this reinforced image of back to the problem, which isn't really there, because nothing happens outside in the real world unless it happens first inside your head. So when I say the snake's head, and I'm saying this, I'm generalizing it for this show, is that the snake's head encompasses that illusion that there is a need to be a different way. So when we spoke about that question there, when a young person comes from a really good household and ends up in county lines, or ends up stabbing somebody, or being stabbed, or being involved in a gang, or being caught with drugs, sometimes it's not the parents' fault. Sometimes, you know, like myself, we are the most accountable that we can be within those four walls. However, and I've often said this, what happens is when your child leaves the house, there's a completely different world out there. And it's that model of the world which is being corrupted by media, by music, and by county lines.
Paul Mackenzie, we would like to thank you for your time today. Paul Mackenzie, the founder of Youth Unity. They work successfully in collaboration with statutory organizations, commission services, and charities, offering workshops, projects, and training for young people and professionals. Paul believes, and their focus is early intervention and early identification of those at risk from gangs, serious youth violence, criminal exploitation, and associated vulnerability strands. We thank you for your time that you've had today. Paul, in a 30-second snapshot, what advice would you like to leave with our guests, audience today?
Okay, I'll keep it very short and in the context of the title here, Missing Black Children. What we have to do is start looking at where these children are, start disrupting where they're being taken to, start disrupting those transport chains. Now, in terms of county lines and the exercise, when I reference back to Stephen Brown and when we went to Margate, is that it's easy to find out where the hotspots are for drugs. And there's not that many. They're emerging week on week. However, if there is a vast amount of children going missing, there is a really good chance that if you go to those towns, you may see your child. So if you go to the place where you believe they could be, you know, just do your research on county lines. I don't want to talk too much about it on here, but there are hotspots where specific children are being found on a week-to-week basis by the police, or by the police in that particular borough or that particular county. And what you have to do is become more compliant and understand where these children are being taken. And in terms of helping with the missing Black children, I personally believe that we need to focus on where they are going, why they're being taken, and where they're being transported to.
Paul Mackenzie from Youth Unity, we would like to thank you for your time today and for sharing some of that wisdom that you've acquired over years of time. We would like to urge our viewers at home to look at the links that were either posted on our screens or in the comment boxes, and to follow their pages, to follow their work, and to be part of what they are bringing to us. These are established organizations. They have the experience, the on-ground experience that they have. Dino Kaisho shared with us a number of incidences that he has witnessed himself and what he's been doing on the ground. Stephen Brown said the same thing, and now we have Paul Mackenzie on our screens that has also shared equal information with us. We would like to read some of your comments as we pop them up onto our screens. Jason Aboyard, thank you for joining us on the show, and thank you for having to join us on the show before. And Jason says, missing children being exchanged for sex trade and drugs, it is shocking. Jason goes on to say, music is nothing to do with it. It's down to a fatherless society. And that is what his view is. And Ms. says parents need not to re-establish their relationships with their children and give them time to open up and hear them. Parents need to re-establish the relationships with their children, particularly if they have concerns. Remember, children need support and encouragement. Sharon AA says, it's not different. If children want to go missing, they have been seduced away, their weakness preyed upon. Joe, thank you for joining us. And Joe Ovi says, children need to be educated about the work ethic and earning an honest crust, not a fast bucks through drugs. Amis goes on to say, parents need to re-establish their relationships with their children. And we read that comment. I think our studio loves that comment. Once again, we thank you for that comment. Honorable Bola says, issues that Dean Senior has raised is so spot on, considering the roots, not just the symptoms. Nejamil Nantan says, as a parent, you must know your children's friends and their friends and the households they come from. Bangi says, Dino Kai Senior, so true, finding balance and monitoring our children is vital, and great recommendations for parenting are right there. Thank you. As Joanne says, peer pressure. As parents, we dread the idea of our kids bending to peer pressure. We imagine our children giving in to friends who tempt them with the alcohol or drugs, or even encouraging them to join in on bullying. We know how difficult it can be to resist the power of a group and go against the tide. We know that even parents have had time standing up to peer pressure. That's why it's exceptionally important to teach the children skills to think independently and have confidence in themselves. We thank you so much for your comments. There have been so many comments that we've had today. D. Rose says, with millions of followers on YouTube for these gangs, of course, music is an influence. And how so very true, D. Completely agree with you. The music that the children are listening to, social media has become, as we heard from Paul, the sweet devil that is in our households, that is with our gadgets, our children are with, and we need to do something about it. This was only a tip of the iceberg that we brought you today from the Extraordinary Achievers. The most important thing that we wanted to deliver today is to deliver to you the people that are on the ground, the people that we can go to as a community, the organizations that we can support, and they were represented today on the Extraordinary Achievers. As you had Dean saying, there are more organizations that they are working in collaboration with, and that are there to be able to support us as a community, as parents, as elders, as brothers, as sisters, as fathers and mothers, as uncles, as aunties, as we go forward. Let's embrace the people that are doing something. Let's get together with them. Let's get behind them. We also had an appeal for us to support them financially, £2, £5, £10, whichever way we can support them. If we can support them with time, if we can support them with resources, if we can come together, we don't need to be crying so much about children missing. If we can get involved in our children's lives and know the habits of our children, we can help. It's time for us to act. Let's not wait again for the African, Caribbean, or Black community. Let's not wait until something else happens and we cry again. Let's get together now. Now is the time to take action. We have talked about it. What's next? Join the groups that are on the ground. Let us support them. We would like to thank you for your time. Next week, we will be looking at parents living in fear of their children. There are parents that are living in fear of their children because of social services. There are parents living in fear of their children for so many other different reasons. We would like to see how they can be supported. What support is there for parents that are living in fear of their children? We thank you for joining us next week and every week at 8 p.m. on every Wednesday. We thank you for your time. We thank you for sharing. We are going to end this program today with an advert for another member from our Afro-Caribbean community with his jerk seasoning royal sauces, and an advocate in our community who is also helping on the ground and who is active in our community. As a way of supporting him today, we would like to play this video. This is a company for Sean. We once again would like to thank you for your time, and we would like to acknowledge our last comment for today. Bangi says, beautiful show today. Thank you, Lady Winnet. And there were powerful speakers who are doing a great job to make a better world for our children. We would like to thank you for tuning in. Until next week, Wednesday at 8 p.m. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you for watching. You can now follow us on Facebook and subscribe our YouTube channel. Don't forget to like, share, and comment.